Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit like, follow, or subscribe on the platform that you're listening to us on. You can also check out my work at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com, for exclusive hard rock and heavy metal interviews, live show coverage, album reviews, and more. My guest for episode 208 is frontman Boone Froggett of the Southern Rock Blues act, Otis. Otis has a brand new single out called Last Fool in the Line. They are also currently on tour, coming to a city or town near you. And here's Boone Froggett to tell you more about it. If I knew absolutely nothing about Otis, how would you describe the band's music to me?
Man, it's just blues-based rock and roll. We're very, very influenced by 60s soul music, 50s blues, improvisational classic rock. So we kind of take all those influences and make a new experience out of it. It's not like when you go to see us live, it's not like seeing a legacy act. It's not like seeing a tribute band. It's like it's a new rock and roll experience, but it's derived from, the roots of all the greats.
Now, before we get to the new single, I kind of want to go back to the beginning of Otis. You guys formed around 2013, 2014-ish. How did it all come together?
Man, I grew up in a very musical family. My grandfather was an old-time fiddler, bluegrass guy. My father was a honky-tonk guitar player, so I was on stage from 8 years old. I never had a chance. They kept me busy, kept me into it. But what really set it off for me was going through my dad's cassette tape collection. He had B.B. King and the Fabulous Thunderbirds and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And once I heard that type of music, that's all I wanted to do from that point. So kind of the way it happened was I met co-founder, bassist of the band, John Seeley, through playing in my dad's band, and we were kind of listening to the same stuff and be like, it would be nice to not have to play all this cover stuff all the time and just kind of play what we wanted. So that's kind of how the band started, and did our first album in 2015, produced by Greg Martin of the Kentucky Headhunters. Had Jimmy Hall in there, blowing harp. Of course, Jimmy sang with Wet Willie, Jeff Beck, and he's currently the band leader for Hank Williams Jr. So he's a cool guy to know. And our first album was actually a tribute album to a bluesman that was from here in Kentucky named JOHN BRIM. He moved to Chicago in his teens and recorded for the Chess label along with Little Walter and Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and all the greats. So we kind of did that record in tribute to him with his lyrics and our music. And we kind of mistakenly caught the attention of Billy F. Gibbons, who turned out to be a fan of the band and gave us some nice press quotes to use, and started mentioning us in interviews, and that really got the ball rolling for us.
So let's talk a little bit about that debut album, Tough Time, a tribute to John Brim. I think a lot of people know John Brim's song Ice Cream Man when Van Halen covered it for the most part.
Yeah.
Kind of a bold move for your debut album to be a covers affair. How did it end up being that way?
Man, it's just like we didn't even really think about it. It was Greg from Headhunters invited me over to eat barbecue at the spot one day, and he's like, he gave me a burnt CD. He's like, I want you to take this stuff home and listen to it. Have you ever heard John Brim? And I was like, no, I haven't. He said, I think you'll like it. It's from the same era of blues that you enjoy listening to. It's a 50s chess era. He's like, listen to this. This guy was from Kentucky. And if you like him, maybe we can, consider doing a project, doing an EP where we do some of his songs and kind of highlight the blues influence that started here in Kentucky. And I was like, yeah, I'll listen to it. So what was meant to be an EP turned into a full length album, and we just went from there. I mean, it was kind of a commercially kind of a crazy thing to do for a first album, but it really came from a pure place, and we wanted to show our love for that early blues music, and it actually turned out to be a great first album for us.
I've had Greg Martin from the Kentucky Headhunters actually on the podcast for promoting their last studio album. How did you end up meeting Greg, and how did he end up getting involved in your first album?
Man, we're from the same little area as the Headhunters were from. So there's actually a picture of Richard Young holding me as a baby. So our families kind of knew each other. Fred bought a tractor from my grandfather. So it's all they've always been around, and I've always really looked up to them. And I started hanging out with Greg in my teens because man, he was the guitar guy around here, and I wanted, I just wanted to know how he got that sound, how he approached guitar, and it really just being around them changed my life. Having access to vintage guitars, vintage amps, and just knowing the same people that they knew, and just them, they were kind of the blueprint for showing us how to be a touring rock and roll band and how to really get out there and do it.
Do you know how your material got into the hands of Billy Gibbons?
I do. Greg and I were down in Nashville. We were attending the funeral of Brian Farmer, who was a longtime guitar tech for Government Mule, Warren Haynes, the Allman Brothers Band. So we were headed back home to where we live here in Glasgow, Kentucky, from Nashville. And Greg gets a call on his phone, and it's from Billy Gibbons, and he's like, "Hey, Greg, I'm in Nashville for a few days. If you're around, let me know, and we'll get together, eat supper or something." So we call Billy back and head right back down to Nashville because when when the Reverend calls, you've got to you got to do what Billy wants. So we headed down and had supper with Billy and his wife Gilligan. It was my first time meeting Billy, so I was pretty nervous because Billy's my guy. He's my hero. Grew up listening to Rio Grande Mud and Fandango and all those classic ZZ albums. So meeting him was really cool. And toward the end when we parted ways, Greg just handed him the CD and he's like, "Hey man, you might use it as a coaster, but check this out sometime. I think you'll dig it. I produced it. Jimmy Hall's on it." And when he mentioned Jimmy Hall, he kind of got kind of a serious look in his eye, like, all right, this is going to be some good stuff. So we get a call back from Billy the very next day and said, I burned it onto the hard drive. This is fine playing, great stuff. And he said, I love the original John Brim music, and it's cool to see a young band pick it up and get it to some other people where they can hear it. So he gave us a press quote to use for the album and started mentioning us in interviews, podcasts, and has stayed in contact with us. I've seen him earlier this year out on the Rock Legends cruise. So Billy's a big influence and a great friend to the band.
So also right around that timeline of the release of your first album, I noticed you did some backing vocals on an album for Blackstone Cherry, their Kentucky album. How did that opportunity come about for you?
Kind of the same deal as the Headhunters. John Fred Young, the drummer for Blackstone Cherry, is Richard Young from the Headhunters' son. So we're all kind of from the same town. We've done a lot of touring with Blackstone Cherry. We've toured Europe with them all over the states. So it was just a natural thing. When they were in town, working on this album, people would pop in, just hang out and check on them, see what was going on. And I just happened to walk in at the right moment, and they were like, "Hey, we need somebody to sing background vocals on this Edwin Starr tune. Do you know it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know it. I can get in there and do it." So I jumped up in there and one take and knocked out the background vocals.
In 2018, Otis released Eyes of the Sun through Cleopatra Records. How did you end up getting the record deal?
It was through a great friend of ours, Paul Nelson, who was the longtime manager for Johnny Winter. I'd emailed Paul, didn't know him from nobody, knew who he was, knew that he managed Johnny Winter, and I was like, "Hey, we're in this young kind of classic rock sounding band, and we're looking to get in contact with some labels, and we got some new music." So I sent him the music, and he connected with it. He was like, "All right, I think I can do something with this." So he shopped us around to a couple of labels, and Cleopatra ended up biting, and it's kind of unheard of. They signed us without, just based on the merit of the music. They didn't ask us about social media numbers. They didn't ask us about sales, any of that. They were just like, "All right, this is good music. Let's go." And then that's kind of how the whole thing happened. And it's been a great thing for us. We're really proud of that album. And that's what every band waits for, is an opportunity to have creative control and record a full length album. And we really took our time with the song flow of the album, making sure everything was right. We recorded it to 2-inch tape. We wanted it to be as authentic as we could possibly make it. And we're, like I said, we're really proud of the record. And we miss our buddy, Paul Nelson, who passed away earlier this year.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
He produced the album, of course. What did he kind of bring to the table for you? As, I mean, this is your first album of all original material, so I assume there's some nerves there and kind of some learning curves there for you as a band.
Oh, absolutely. It was first time working with a producer like Paul, he was like this workhorse guy. He was always listening. It's great to have a set of ears like that outside of the band, because when you're working on this stuff and you're trying to get it down in studio, it's hard to have an outside perspective yourself of what's going on. So he was able to help us out with some different things, like timing. There was one song in particular that we were having kind of a timing fluctuation on, and we were very against using a click track, because I think that just kills the vibe of the music and just the energy of the band. So we worked hard to keep the timing of that song enough to get it down and do the record. And he was great with things like that. He taught me a lot about fill licks on guitar. I would play a lick and he'd be like, that's too Buddy Guy, or that's too Jeff Beck here. Let's try to do this here. And he taught me a lot of stuff. Of course, he had a lot of experience, touring with Johnny Winter and all those years. And then they had just done that Johnny Winter album, had all the crazy guests on it. They had like Joe Perry and Eric Clapton and Derek Trucks. So he had just come with the experience of having done that album with Johnny, and it was such a good energy to have in the room. A good guy. We were very fortunate to be able to work with him.
Some of the music from that album ended up on the soundtrack for the Street Survivors movie in 2020. That was the story of the Leonard Skinner plane crash in 1977. How did the opportunity to get your music in the film come about?
Cleopatra Records has a film side to their company, and they were the ones that did the film. So it was all basically all Cleopatra music. And we're Artemis Pyle and his band. They're good friends of ours. Love Artemis, and he has, man, to be as old as he is, he has such a great spirit and energy about him. I think Artemis could outwork a lot of people my age and younger. He just has that. He's, regardless of what has happened to him in his life, he has still that young spirit, which is really a cool thing to see. And for a young Southern rock band, that's a really high honor to have your music be entwined in that story.
After the release of Eyes of the Sun, Otis started touring a little more. You guys made yourself you found yourselves overseas touring Europe. Was that a different kind of experience for you guys? Or used to probably being local prior to that?
Oh yeah, we had toured the United States and had that experience. But man, going over there to the UK and mainland Europe is something totally different. Like the reverence they have for music there is amazing. Like they'll go before the show and they'll get them 2 or 3 beers or whatever they're drinking, because they don't want to lose their place in the crowd. And it's like even at a festival, like every audience is a listening room audience. They're listening very attentively. You'll play a lick and they'll latch onto it and feed back to you. They'll clap, which is something that we don't always get to experience here in the States, because there's 3 football games going on in the background, and everybody's on their phone, and it's just hard to get their attention. But for whatever reason, they have a different respect for music, over there than they do here. And I think a lot of it's that adage of where we come from. As much as I love the Beatles, I'll never be able to play the Beatles music authentically. And that goes the same way. Their bands over there will never really be able to capture the authentic Southern rock thing. So it's kind of like we get to give that experience back to them. And we got to play with a lot of really great acts that we wouldn't have the chance to play with here in the States. I mean, we got to play with Cheap Trick, Foreigner, UFO, Graham Nash. I mean, the list goes on. So it was a great experience for us as a band. Got to play some amazing places too. We played Caerphilly Castle in Wales. We got to play Ulster Hall in Belfast, and that's the first place that Stairway to Heaven was played live by Zeppelin. So to be on that same stage was an incredible experience. So looking forward to getting the opportunity to go back over there and visit.
On July 14th of 2024, you guys released your latest single, Last Fool in the Line. It's been 7 years since you last released new material. Was there a reason for the lapse in releases besides, a worldwide lockdown?
Well, that certainly contributed to it, and we had a couple of we hit a couple of speed bumps in 2020. Our original drummer Andrew decided he wanted to stay home and do the family thing, and then our guitar player ended going over and playing bass for Blackstone Cherry. So that just that left me and co-founder of the band, John Seeley. So while all that was going on, I had thyroid cancer. I had to get my thyroid removed, take radiation, go through all the treatments. So it took about a year to get that took care of. And then once I got the green light health wise, we went right to finding two new guys to bring into the band. So that's the reason that it took so long. But I really think it was supposed to happen that way, because in the meantime, I had the opportunity to do social media for the Kentucky Headhunters and come out with them as a touring crew member. So I got a lot of experience in that time and got to meet a lot of different people, which gave me kind of a fresh perspective on the music business, a fresh perspective on your band. And you sit there and think, does the world need an Otis? Are we are we viable? And time told me yes you are, because there's so many people that reached out and was like, we miss seeing you guys. We consistently got show offers through the whole hiatus deal. So it was like, all right, let's focus on building a bigger, more powerful Otis, and that's what we did.
Well, I'm glad that you beat thyroid cancer. That's good to hear. And I would imagine it was scary with the diagnosis, being a singer as well.
Oh yeah, man, it was really scary. Like the surgery was supposed to only be maybe 3 hours long, but the cancer had created like tentacle like projections, and they were attached to my vocal cords. So I literally had a scalpel on my vocal cords peeling this stuff off. And the first surgeon I talked to said, you may not get anything out above a whisper after this surgery. So at the end, I was like, nah, we got to find, we got to find somebody better. I can't really accept that. So got a more specialized surgeon who had worked on singers and performers and broadcast people. So I was really confident that I would get my voice. And I honestly, I can hit notes now that I couldn't have dreamed of hitting before, because I had a 3 centimeter mass in my throat. So it's turned out to be a great thing for me personally and the band, to have a break, take care of that health issue, come back with a new lineup. It's all been very refreshing, man.
Well, let's talk about the song "Last Fool in the Line." You describe it as a classic story of one man's bad luck. Why don't you elaborate on that?
As a tour musician, you get access to some really interesting people. You're loading out in the back alley of a bar, you're hanging out in the smoking section, and that's where some of the best stories are told. So we're kind of taking some of those shady character stories and putting them into a song. And there's a lot of people that sometimes they just have a bad run of luck, and it doesn't necessarily make them a bad person, and they're still enjoyable to be around. But it's just like they still, you can see them, just going through all this bad stuff. But it makes a great story, and I think everybody has either been the last fool in the line or at least knows somebody who has.
This single is eventually going to lead to a full studio album, correct?
Yeah, we're in the current market, the singles thing is kind of the game everybody's playing. But obviously, our goal is to release a full length album. That's the way that we like to listen to music. That's the way we're inspired by music. So we're hoping to do that. You can't take a single from Spotify and read the liner notes and look at the artwork. It's not really the experience we want to give people. So we're doing some stuff in the background to try to make a full length album happen in the future.
Do you have other music for singles ready to go down the line?
Yeah, we're gonna keep up a good schedule of single releases, and even got some live stuff that we're talking about releasing as singles as well. So you're going to hear a lot more from Otis in the future.
The single was produced by Grammy-winning producer KEVIN MCKENDREE. Is he going to be working on the entire album, or do you just work with him on this single or a couple of singles?
I think we're going to be working with Kevin for a good while now. We had such a great time working with him in his studio. And if you don't know Kevin, he's played with Brian Setzer, George Thorogood, Delbert McClinton. He's worked with all kinds of folks in the studio. Bluesman Tinsley Ellis is actually the guy that hooked us up with Kevin. We love what Tinsley does, and he had just did a record there, and he's like, "You guys should go down and work with Kevin." We're like, all right, let's do it. So we got in contact with him, and he has a lot of the same outlook on music and recording as we do. When we were setting up the studio, I was like, Kevin, what new music do you listen to? He's like, man, I don't really listen to new music. I listen to Howlin' Wolf. And I was like, all right, we're in the right place. And he we only use 3 microphones in total on the whole drum kit. So Kevin knows how to use the room and knows how to record a live band. So it was a great thing.
You guys recorded this as a group in the room at the Rock House in Franklin, Tennessee. Was this your first time at that particular studio?
Yeah, it was. It was our first time working with Kevin, and our first time in the studio as well. So it was a great experience.
Do you think that you'll continue with sort of the theme of these shady characters like The Last Fool as you construct this album and string of singles?
I think so, man. Everybody seems to really relate to this song more than anything that we've done. Just in the last week, we were up for Tracks of the Week over at Classic Rock Magazine. Joe Bonamassa added us to his personal playlist. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I think this is the Otis that everybody wants to hear. As a band, you're capable of going in so many different directions and creating so many things. But sometimes you just have to listen to your people and your audience and which direction to go.
You just finished up a group of live shows, and you're going to be heading back out again, I believe, starting in August. Are these going to be a combination of headlining dates and opening dates?
Yeah, that's kind of what's going on right now. Doing some headlining shows, doing some opening act shows. We've been opening for Jackal, the Kentucky Headhunters. We're getting ready to open for TC's Rock Trip in Knuckleheads at Kansas City, and that's a classic session drummer. Tommy, he's played with Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Alice Cooper, Ted Nugent, you name it. So it's kind of a review of all the stuff that he's played on live and played on in studio. So that's going to be a lot of fun to work with him, and we're getting to venture out. We got to play the legendary Iridium in New York City a couple of weeks ago, which was a big thrill for to go from this little old small town we're from that's got one stoplight to go to play a legendary basement club on Times Square is a big accomplishment for a band our size.
I'm intrigued about this corn festival that you're playing in Wisconsin. Music, beer, corn, and camping. Is this your first appearance there?
It is our first time at Corn Fest, and they got us there headlining. So corn, beer, and fun. What more could you want?
In keeping with kind of the food theme, you just played the Duncan Hines days, right?
We sure did, man. That's really close to where we're from. It's just up down the road here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. We had a great time. We got to Government Cheese was there, and Sam Bush, legendary mandolin player that kind of started the newgrass movement. So, but we had a great time. A ton of people there, and they even sent us home with some cake mix.
Perfect. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you how you settled on the band name Otis.
Greg Martin from the Headhunters actually named a band. There was a blues rock band in Louisville that was a power trio in the late 1960s, but they never really quite made it. But the name always stuck with him. So he was like, guys, won't y'all, take this name and put some meaning to it and see what you can do with it. And so that's what we did. We were a young band at the time. That may have not been the smartest idea looking back, because you got, Otis Rush, Otis Redding, Otis Taylor. There's a lot of Otis names in the blues world, but I'm glad we did it. People seem to like it. It looks cool on a poster. So here we are.
I don't know if you're a WWE fan, but they got a wrestler named Otis, and maybe you could do his theme down the road.
There you go. Give us a holler. We'll work something out.
Well, Boone, those are all the questions I have for you today. The new Otis single is Last Fool in the Line. It's out now. Future music coming down the road, and you guys are going to be on tour. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast and tell me more about Otis.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Once again, I want to thank Boone Froggett of Otis for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out their latest single, Last Fool in the Line, out now. While you're at it, check out their 2018 studio album, Eyes of the Sun. Head over to your favorite music streaming platform, take a listen to the album and the new single. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy, support the artist. For all things Otis, head over to their official website, theotisband.com. I also want to thank John Lappin of Lappin Enterprises and Cleopatra Records for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. Discover your next favorite artist on the Rock is George podcast.